Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be discussing how Fernando Mendoza compares as a prospect to other quarterbacks selected first overall from 2018 through 2025. We're going to take a look at some of Mendoza's all-22 film, some of his strengths and potential areas to improve upon, some advanced stats of his, and then finally, once again, compare him, in my subjective opinion, to other first-round quarterbacks and rank and tier them out as well, as far as how much would I want to take this quarterback prospect first overall in a draft class? So watch to the end of this video and you should have a pretty good idea. Well, some all-22 clips display some of what I'm going to be mentioning here. I'm going to read you around a 5 to 7 minute synopsis of Fernando Mendoza's strengths and potential areas to improve upon. So Fernando Mendoza is a redshirt junior out of Indiana who began his career as a 3-star recruit at Cal before ultimately transferring to Indiana this past season. He stands at 6'5" and 225 pounds, giving him 87th percentile height and 61st percentile weight for a collegiate prospect at quarterback. One general rule of thumb for me is that if you aren't at least 6'1", you're going to be a huge outlier to work out as a long-term quarterback in the league, so this box is checked. Next, we move on to the mental aspect of the position, which involves leadership, poise, and pressure situations such as being clutch, anticipation, pocket presence, and being able to get through your reads. As far as leadership is concerned, he seems a bit quirky in post-game interviews, but is always positive and makes sure that his teammates/coaches are recognized for their work and doesn't take all the credit for himself. His teammates and coaches always seem to love him, which checks another important box. He also plays well under pressure during tight games, and even when he isn't having the most prolific passing day, he does everything he can to will his team to victory, such as his crazy rushing touchdown in the end of the championship game, or his game winner against Penn State to Amar Cooper, so that box is checked. But he also isn't scared to get hit and will stand tall in a pocket with pressure in his face to deliver the ball, even when he knows he's going to get hit. As far as processing is concerned, I like to divide this into two types, pre- and post-snap processing. As far as this pre-snap processing is concerned, I think he generally excels at anticipation against zone coverage and often seems to have an answer for what he's seeing pre-snap and gets the ball out quickly. Now, he can be fooled by disguised coverages and odd front disguised pressure looks, which leads him to allow free rushers at himself and doesn't really help his offensive line, but I suspect he'll get better with time and have seen successful reps at times already. It will, however, require substantial improvement. As far as his post-snap processing, he gets through his reads, sometimes through as many as 4, at a smooth rate when protected and can allow himself to work within a clean pocket. He does run into issues when he's pressured because he doesn't have a lot of pocket mobility with, those violent movements due to a lack of quick twitch athleticism. Lacks the ability to escape pressure once it's inside the pocket, and pressure can make him speed quickly through his progressions and lead to poor passes due to an inability to extend plays to set up better passing windows, which means it will be important for him to be protected more than other players with, pocket and general play extension abilities like Mahomes, Caleb Williams, or Josh Allen. His pocket presence is fine as far as his ability to sense pressure is concerned. It's just the athleticism that doesn't allow him to get out of these situations as easily as the players I previously mentioned can, which places an importance on him being able to take advantage of his intelligence with pre-snap diagnoses of the coverages he's facing and having a plan to get the ball out quickly. Now we move on to the physical aspects of the position, such as arm talent, stationary accuracy, on the run accuracy, and rushing ability. As far as arm talent is concerned, he's fairly average here. He can make shot throws with good timing down the sidelines if he has a good base and can get into the throw, but doesn't have an arm like a Josh Allen or Caleb Williams who can rip throws into tight windows with ease, even when they aren't having to anticipate the windows being open due to being able to have insane velocity to make up for it. Though he does have the intelligence to understand when windows should be open, so I do think he will be able to get it done down the field, but will need to be a step ahead of the defense, unlike more physically gifted quarterbacks. As far as his stationary accuracy is concerned, it's incredible and, in my opinion, arguably the best thing about him. He throws with touch when necessary and can rip throws when he can get a step into them. He layers the ball over linebackers and beneath safeties over the middle of the field with ease and pinpoint accuracy, and he delivers what I call runner's balls, where the placement is in perfect stride with his receivers and allows them to maximize yardage after the catch consistently. He has a particularly beautiful slot fade and back shoulder fade for boundary receivers, which should help him in the red zone. As far as his on-the-run accuracy is concerned, his accuracy takes a bit of a hit, but is functional. His lack of arm talent does hinder his ability to throw down the field with zip and as much accuracy when making off-platform throws, and he likes to throw lobs down the field away from defenders, which makes it an either my guy gets it or no one does type of throw. But it's not easy for his receivers at times due to the reduced accuracy, can still be too far outside of the receiver's grasp, for instance. The layup throws, however, are still thrown with consistent accuracy, even when on the run. As far as his rushing upside is concerned, it's not great. He can pick up a first down here and there, but he will not be a true dual threat quarterback at the next level. He lacks speed and burst to be a danger on designed runs or zone reads, so I don't think that'll be a staple of the offense he's asked to run. Although I do think that his new head coach, Kubiak, is probably going to implement it a little bit to help him be comfortable starting out. Finally, what type of offense did he run at Indiana, and will he need to adjust to a more complex system at the next level? At Indiana, Coach Cignetti employed a balanced spread offense that has a heavy reliance on RPOs and quick game passing. He will need to be able to be much less reliant on RPOs at the next level, although once again, I think Coach Kubiak will utilize some RPOs to help Fernando Mendoza feel comfortable and grow. Kubiak currently runs a wide zone play action style offense that uses bootlegs quite often. I think that while athleticism is hardly Mendoza's biggest strength, he does have the requisite athleticism to be able to get on the move in a well-schemed offense with a run game that's effective, which will be critical for him. Now, the Raiders have Genty at running back, and that should really help him out. I think he's a fine fit in a wide zone scheme. One issue is that the Raiders have a poor offensive line as a whole at the moment, which ranked 28th in pass blocking and 30th in run blocking per PFF. They need to spend a lot of money in free agency and probably use some draft capital to shore up the offensive line. But tackles Colt Miller and Charles Grant are good to great at pass blocking, and Miller is also good at run blocking, so they have somewhat of a foundation on the outside to work with, but the interior needs substantial improvement. As far as the pass catchers are concerned, he does have Brock Bowers at tight end, but is otherwise lacking in receiver talent, with Trey Tucker as an average deep threat and 2025 second round pick Jack Besh not really showing much as a rookie. So the receiver position also needs to be addressed. In conclusion, while we do need to see investments at interior offensive line and wide receiver, I do think Mendoza has what it takes to be successful in the league, and the situation can easily be more than adequate if the Raiders address these issues previously mentioned. Now, moving on to some advanced stats here. These are 2-year sample sizes for the chart on the top. His clean pocket PFF pass grade of 92.9%. I don't have a percentile for that, but that is an elite number. Same as his no play action PFF pass grade of 92.6. Those are elite numbers. Now, moving on to his under pressure PFF pass grade of 75.9. That isn't an elite number, but it's not as bad as you might think. And there's usually a significant drop off for quarterbacks because usually when you're kept clean and, able to be calm, you play better than when you're under constant duress, right? So 75.9 isn't a terrible number, but it isn't quite elite like some of these other grades. And same thing goes with his PFF scramble grade of 51.7. He's just not a particularly great athlete by NFL standards. He has, once again, the athleticism to pick up a first down, but he's not going to be used like Lamar Jackson or anything. His avoids negative plays of 12.5% is 89th percentile, very good number. And his sack rate of 5.4% is 49th percentile. So, he generally tries to get the ball out quickly, is an anticipatory type of quarterback, and that helps him out tremendously. But once pressure does get to him, he's not particularly dynamic in terms of his pocket movement or ability to escape. So that he's probably going to get sacked more often than not when he does get interior pressure at the next level. In terms of his college QBR of 90.3, that's 97th percentile. His college yards per attempt of 9.3 is 84th percentile. And his breakout age of 19.9 is 69th percentile. So overall, this guy is a really good quarterback. He's just more of a pocket passing type of quarterback and less so an improvisational or dual threat type of quarterback. And I want to give a special shout out to my Patreon members. Thank you to Big Hunt, SP, Mage Jack, Infamy MTG, AOYOB, The Don, and Any Buckeye. Thank you guys. I'm doing this full time now, and without your support, this would not be possible. If you'd like to become a member, I'm going to leave a link in both the comment section and description of this video. You'll receive not only, but including access to a Discord where we have a channel where we have NFL and college football talk, as well as a channel where we have fantasy football talk, and a third channel where we laugh at poor trade offers that we've been offered in fantasy football. But if you'd like to, you can always DM me with private, questions if you don't wish for it to be known by any community members. But you'll also get help with building your fantasy football teams every year. I'll use wins above replacement, as well as just looking at the general lineup and scoring settings to help you with your teams each year. I'll help you with trades that are advantageous based on those factors as well. You'll be part of a fun and growing active community. You'll not only receive access to videos early guaranteed, but you'll also have the ability to ask for personal videos that you and only you can view, or potentially, if you'd like something to be shown on the channel, you'll have preferential treatment there as well. So please consider becoming a member. I'd really appreciate it. Let's get back to the video. Now, finally, moving on to my subjective quarterback rankings of first overall quarterbacks from 2018 through 2025. Now, understand that this is just my subjective opinion of what I thought of these quarterback prospects. And from the tiering system, it's how much would I personally want to take this quarterback prospect number one overall. It's not, do I like them at all as a prospect or, first round in general? No, it's first overall. So I have an elite, great, good, solid, and meh tier. In the elite tier, I thought Trevor Lawrence was the best prospect I've seen since 2018 coming out as a prospect. Obviously, he didn't hit at the NFL level the way people, including myself, had hoped he would. But at the same time, it's really important to understand, and this goes with all these quarterbacks, coaching and situation matters so much. Take a look at Trevor Lawrence as a prime example. He's had generally very poor coaching and situation around him until this season for the most part, right? But you take a look at what he did, especially in the latter half of the season this season, once he was finally into the rhythm of the offense and learning it, he was great down the stretch. So selected in 2021 first overall, I didn't really have a perfect prospect comp for him. I comped him to Andrew Luck plus because I thought, he was taller than Andrew Luck and had more of an ability to see the field. But at the same time, Andrew Luck is probably the smartest quarterback I've ever seen. Potentially, at least. Brady's definitely up there. Same with Peyton Manning. But regardless, I thought, the accuracy, the ability to play in structure, the ability to put the ball really anywhere you want on the field was much like Andrew Luck. And he's doing this at 6'6", 220 pounds. I thought arm talent was his biggest strength. And I thought handling pressure in the sense of when he wasn't prepared for a blitz, he'd get sped up through his progressions, be inaccurate, sometimes throw costly interceptions. But overall, I would say he's the best prospect from just a prospect perspective I've seen in the past, since 2018 at least. I also thought Caleb Williams just a tick under there, mostly due to his size, in my opinion, and a little bit of not an inability, a lack of desire to play in structure. So he was selected in 2024 first overall. I comped him to a combination of Mahomes and Rodgers. Mahomes in his ridiculous sack avoidance, his ability to play improvisationally, find ridiculous plays down the field, throw on the run. It was reminiscent of Mahomes, but he was also like Rodgers in that his deep ball was inconsistent. But I think it was more of a purposeful inconsistency, if that makes sense. And let me explain. I think he's deathly afraid of turnovers. I don't think he likes turnovers, which no quarterback does. But I think a lot of times on his deep balls, where he can't just know that it's going to be rifled in, he likes to throw it so that only his guy or nobody's going to catch it. But I think he's more on the nobody's going to catch it side of things. So I think that was kind of a similar thing to Rodgers, but Rodgers, to his credit, was much better than Caleb coming out and much better than Caleb right now with his deep ball, in that it was pretty much a dot every time. But I liked that kind of similarity between the two. Once again, not perfect in terms of his height, but he did meet the minimum threshold that I personally like, being 6'1" for quarterbacks, 215 pounds, so very bulky. Once again, improvisation was his biggest strength, but I thought hero ball, he just did not want to play in structure, would refuse the 5 to 10 yard gain, going for the 40 to 50 yard bomb. And it did follow him to the NFL level. Although, much like with Trevor Lawrence, once again, now that he has Ben Johnson and a good offensive mind that actually knows how to call plays, you've seen the progression in which Caleb is taken from year 1 to year 2. Then Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, he came out of nowhere in his final collegiate season. He was a 5th-year player, but when it was dominant, with Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, I thought he was Andrew Luck, and the comp was a little bit better. 6'4", 221 pounds, perfect size. I thought accuracy was his biggest strength, all over the field, pinpoint runners balls all over the field, even while on the run. But I thought his arm talent in terms of his raw velocity and ability to get the ball deep down the field wasn't as good as some other quarterbacks that I've seen. So I thought that was probably his biggest weakness. But overall, I think that all three of these guys are tier 1 elite prospects that I would love and beg to be able to take first overall if I was a franchise. Moving on to the great tier, I think Mendoza and Mayfield are in this tier. With Mendoza, I think he's going to be obviously selected first overall. I've already comped him to Jared Goff plus. Jared Goff in that he's very accurate, layers the football quite well, plays in structure quite well, is very anticipatory, but lacks some of the athleticism to really be able to extend plays. Does have issues with pressure, and it really affects him. But he's a little bit more mobile than Jared Goff is, able to pick up first downs better. So I think he's a little bit better than Goff. 6'5", 225 pounds. Once again, accuracy is his biggest strength. I think athleticism is potentially his biggest weakness. But you could also say handling interior pressure or pocket mobility. Baker Mayfield in 2018, I loved him. I know there was debate between him and Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold's now won a Super Bowl. But with Baker Mayfield, I comped him to Brett Favre, a true gunslinger. 6'1", 215 pounds. So once again, he met that minimum threshold that I like to see. I'd prefer taller, but it is what it is. His dog mentality, I think, is his biggest strength. He plays with the most heart. He will go 50 yards down the field to block for his running back or receiver and actually block. I mean, he's my favorite real life quarterback personally. But that can be a detriment to him at the same time. That's arguably could be one of his biggest weaknesses is his refusal to let a play die at times and just try to fit the ball in there. It can lead to interceptions. But I think height, because like some of these 6'1" quarterbacks, he has to trust sometimes that his guy will be where he's going to be over the intermediate middle of the field. And it can lead to costly interceptions. So I think any of those things are arguably his biggest weakness. Moving on to the good tier, I think Cam Ward was a good prospect. I'd feel fine about it. I comped him to the best of Mahomes and the worst of Zach Wilson. So with Mahomes, he had a lot of the improvisational ability to look down the field, keep his eyes up while extending the play a ridiculous amount of time. Had a very good arm with a lot of arm talent in terms of velocity to get the ball where he wants it. But at the same time, he's a lot like Zach Wilson at times in that sometimes he makes the most baffling interceptions where his guy was completely covered. There was nowhere to go with the ball. And I just don't know what he sees sometimes, at least coming out as a prospect. So the best of Mahomes and the worst of Zach Wilson. He did this while being 6'2", which is a fine height, and 219 pounds. I thought once again, arm talent was his biggest strength and turnovers were probably his biggest weakness. A true gunslinger, much like Baker Mayfield in a way. Now in the solid, I had Kyler Murray here. So he was selected in 2019 first overall. I comped him to Russell Wilson. Not a perfect comp, but there was no comp that was perfect for him, in my opinion. Now, here's why I was not as high on the selection. He's 5'10", 207 pounds. Being 5'10", you're just not going to be able to run a traditional offense. Your offensive coordinator is going to have to work much more around your weaknesses than most quarterbacks. You can't really use the intermediate middle of the field easily at all. Sometimes you cannot actually access it. So he had to get outside the pocket a lot. He, throw on the run, scramble for first downs. But the thing he had ridiculous athleticism. I mean, besides maybe Michael Vick, maybe Lamar Jackson, maybe a couple I'm not thinking of, but he's one of the most athletic prospects we've ever seen. So as far as from a fantasy and rushing upside perspective, he was a great prospect for fantasy drafts. But I was thinking of this from a real life perspective. I just would not be as excited to take somebody 5'10". It just doesn't work out. So, athleticism was his biggest strength, and I think height was his biggest weakness because he also had a cannon for an arm and was generally accurate. It's just so hard to actually be consistent and have long-term success when you're this short. It just isn't generally going to happen. Now we move to Bryce Young, who I have meh. So, selected in 2023 first overall. I comped him to midget Drew Brees, very accurate, very, very, very good processor, understands what the defense is in and how to beat it. He's just really short at 5'10", 204 pounds. And I don't think he even plays necessarily at 200 pounds. But yeah, just does not have a ton of arm talent in terms of the actual velocity and ability to throw deep down the field as easily as some of these other quarterbacks. Not a ridiculous amount of athleticism, although it's plenty enough, I guess. But processing, I thought, was his biggest strength, and height was his biggest weakness. But just these 5'10" quarterbacks, I just cannot get down with selecting them first overall because the upside just is so limited, and it's so rare that they work out. And it's rare enough that most quarterback prospects work out, let alone when you're starting at a point where you can't access the entirety of the field and your offensive coordinator is going to have to work really hard to mask your deficiencies. it's just really tough. So that's why I was lower on Murray and Bryce Young than other people were coming out. And so, where do you have Mendoza ranked among other first overall selections from 2018 through 2025? Let me know below in the comment section. Once again, that was just my subjective view as to why I liked some prospects more than others. Nothing against any of them personally. But yeah, I'll be curious what you guys think. Once again, I'm doing this full time. If you would like to subscribe to my Patreon and help support the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you to my Patreon members. If you cannot or do not wish to, if you could just like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment below, I'd really appreciate it. With all that being said, thank you and have a good day.